A cardinal just attacked a house finch over a pile of seeds large enough to feed them both for a week. There was no shortage of food. There was no reason to fight. And yet, within the next 60 seconds, a chickadee was displaced by a titmouse without a single touch. Two house sparrows tumbled across the lawn in a flapping chase. By the time you finish your coffee, a dozen small wars have unfolded around a single feeder that holds more food than every bird present could eat in an entire day. This is the puzzle. The food is abundant. The aggression is constant. Those two facts should not coexist. Most people assume the answer is hunger. It is the obvious explanation. We picture wild animals locked in a desperate struggle for survival, and we imagine a full feeder is a contested prize because nature is scarce. But decades of research from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology point to a very different conclusion. The fighting at your feeder is barely connected to hunger at all. What you are actually watching is the maintenance of a social order. The birds at your feeder are not a random crowd. They are members of overlapping social groups with histories, rankings, and relationships. Cornell researchers have documented that many familiar backyard species live inside structured hierarchies. The old term for this is pecking order. It came from studies of domestic chickens nearly a century ago, and it turned out to describe something far broader than barnyard hens. In these hierarchies, certain individuals consistently win access to resources, and others consistently step aside. The conflicts you see are largely about confirming and enforcing those rankings. Consider what a dominance hierarchy actually accomplishes. In a stable hierarchy, most disputes are settled without any real fighting. A subordinate bird sees a dominant one approaching and simply moves away. This saves both birds the energy and risk of an actual physical contest. The brief displays we observe, the raised crests, the open beaks, the short chases, are usually the visible surface of a system designed to avoid costly conflict, not to create it. Paradoxically, the constant low-level aggression at a feeder is evidence of a hierarchy working, not failing. These displays follow recognizable forms that anyone can learn to read. A dominant bird often makes itself appear larger, raising the feathers on its head and body, leaning forward toward its rival, and partially spreading or drooping its wings to broaden its silhouette. The open beak, sometimes accompanied by a sharp call or a rapid series of notes, signals readiness to escalate without requiring contact. A subordinate bird responds with the opposite posture, flattening its feathers, crouching, and turning or moving away to communicate submission. Once observed, these signals transform a chaotic-seeming scramble into a legible exchange of intentions. Status is communicated through signals that birds can read instantly. In several species, plumage itself carries information about rank. House sparrows offer a well-studied example. Male house sparrows display a patch of black feathers on the throat and chest, often called a badge, and the size of that badge correlates with social status. Birds with larger badges tend to dominate those with smaller ones. This allows individuals to assess one another and resolve disputes before they begin. The signal does part of the work that fighting would otherwise require. Hierarchies are also shaped by who is watching. Behavioral studies have documented what researchers call audience effects, in which an animal adjusts its behavior depending on which other individuals are present and observing. Research on social birds has found that individuals can modulate the intensity of their aggressive displays based on the composition of the surrounding group, behaving more assertively when certain observers are present and more cautiously when potential challengers are nearby. A bird may calibrate its actions because reputation within the group has consequences that extend beyond a single encounter. A confrontation at a feeder is rarely an isolated event. It is one moment in an ongoing relationship. This brings us to a consequence that is easy to overlook. Life is not equal across the hierarchy. Dominant birds gain reliable, low-stress access to food. Subordinate birds pay a different price. Research on social rank in birds has linked subordinate status to elevated levels of stress hormones, particularly corticosterone. Lower-ranking individuals often feed at less favorable times, take greater risks at the edges of cover, and experience chronic physiological stress from constant vigilance and displacement. The cost of losing is not only a missed seed, it is a sustained burden carried across the season. The physical toll of this stress can be measured. Chronically elevated corticosterone has been associated with poorer feather condition, as stressed birds may molt less effectively or maintain their plumage poorly, which in turn reduces insulation during cold weather. Subordinate birds can also experience weight loss and weakened immune function, leaving them more vulnerable to disease and less able to survive harsh conditions. In this way, a low position in the social order can quietly compound into a genuine threat to an individual's survival. The specific species in an American backyard each bring their own patterns to this system. Black-capped chickadees form winter flocks with remarkably stable dominance relationships, and researchers have found that a bird's rank can influence its access to food, its choice of safe feeding sites, and even its long-term survival through harsh weather. Within these flocks, individuals appear to remember their standing relative to specific flock mates, rather than reacting randomly to whoever happens to be nearby. Northern cardinals show their own version of resource defense, particularly as the breeding season approaches, when males become increasingly intolerant of rivals near a reliable food source. House finches and house sparrows often form the noisy, shifting clusters that produce the most visible squabbling, with rank frequently signaled and contested through posture and plumage. Across all of these species, the underlying logic is consistent. The disputes are organized, not chaotic. Perhaps the most striking finding from this research is the role of memory. Many of these birds are not simply reacting to the moment. They retain information about past encounters and about the identities of other individuals. A subordinate bird that lost a contest yesterday is more likely to yield today, not because it is hungrier or weaker in that instant, but because it remembers the outcome. The social order persists across time because the participants remember it. What looks like a sudden burst of aggression is often the continuation of a long-running relationship between two recognized individuals. There is a familiar logic here that extends beyond birds. Human social groups also develop hierarchies, and much of the competition within them is not about immediate physical need. People compete for status, recognition, and position, even when their basic resources are secure. The signals differ, and the stakes differ, but the underlying pattern of organizing access through established rank, rather than through constant open conflict, is something humans and many social animals share. Recognizing this can make the behavior at a feeder feel less like senseless fighting and more like a structured social process unfolding in plain view. This understanding has practical value for anyone who maintains a backyard feeder. If aggression is driven largely by competition for position at a single contested resource, then concentrating all the food in one place intensifies that competition. A single crowded feeder becomes a choke point that dominant birds can monopolize, leaving subordinate individuals to absorb the stress of constant displacement. The solution suggested by this research is distribution. Multiple feeders, spaced at least 10 to 15 feet apart and ideally positioned out of sight of one another, reduce the ability of any single bird to control access. The choice of feeder and seed can further ease competition by separating species with different habits. Tube feeders with short perches favor smaller birds, such as chickadees, finches, and titmice, while platform and hopper feeders accommodate larger or ground-oriented species like cardinals and jays. Offering different foods at different stations reduces direct overlap as well. Black oil sunflower seed appeals broadly to many species. Millet draws sparrows and other ground feeders, and suet attracts woodpeckers and nuthatches, allowing several groups to feed at once without converging on a single point. Spacing feeders also reduces crowding-related risks beyond aggression, including the transmission of disease that can occur when many birds are forced into close contact at one site. Providing nearby cover gives subordinate birds places to retreat and approach safely. In effect, a thoughtfully arranged feeding area works with the social structure of birds rather than against it, lowering the overall level of conflict and giving more individuals reliable access to food. There are moments in the year when the hierarchy becomes especially visible. On the morning of the first hard frost, when the cold sharpens every demand for energy, the order of arrival at a feeder reveals itself with unusual clarity, as dominant birds claim the warmest, safest perches first, and subordinates wait at the margins. At spring dawn, when breeding tensions rise and competition intensifies, the same structure surfaces again in sharper displays. These seasonal moments offer a clear window into a social system that operates quietly all year long. The next time activity erupts around a feeder, it is worth pausing to watch more carefully. The chases and displays are not random violence, and they are rarely about simple hunger. They are the visible expression of a social order that the birds carry with them, remember across days, and enforce through signals far more often than through force. A backyard feeder is not only a place where birds eat, it is a stage on which an intricate and largely invisible social world becomes, for a few moments, something we can see.